Hi, we're here today to talk about the elements of a really successful CDAT activity. And we're lucky to have Stephen Lunny, who's from the Surry Hills CDAT here. So welcome, Stephen, and thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, Dennis.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role in Surry Hills community and at the CDAT?
Sure. So I'm a community worker here in Surry Hills. I work for Surry Hills Neighbourhood Centre as the community development worker, and as part of that role I chair the local Surry Hills CDAT, which we host here at Surry Hills Neighbourhood Centre as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And tell us a bit about the Surry Hills community.
So Surry Hills is used to be a lot rougher than it is now, but it's quite highly gentrified now. So, you know, in a city suburb, it's also a large hospitality suburb. So there's a large number of bars and licensed restaurants in this area. And we also have a large social housing block, Northcott precinct, social housing precinct. So they're probably the three elements which I think come to the table in terms of our CDAT work. So a lot of people come to Surry Hills and use alcohol and drugs, and it's an affluent community. And then we have our social housing block where there's definitely a proportion of the population who probably do have issues around drugs and alcohol.
Okay, all right. So tell us a little bit more about that, the particular issues that you confront in the community in relation to drugs and alcohol use.
So I think in Surry Hills, because there's a large number of establishments, alcohol's definitely a significant issue, just because it's a insidious culture in our community, and I think often it's accepted more. So problematic use can be overlooked by people. So that's an issue. And the other one, I'd say there is because people gravitate towards here, there's homelessness around Surry Hills because people come here to party and then get themselves into trouble. And so there's definitely an element of problematic alcohol and drug use in terms of that as well.
Okay, wonderful. So can you tell me about a particular activity that has proven really successful in terms of something that Surry Hills CDAT has done?
One that springs to mind, and we do this annually, is Overdose Awareness Day. We partner, so it's a great collaboration of people who are at the CDAT table. So we have NSW, New South Wales Users and AIDS Association. So that's a peer-based program. So it's people who use drugs who are part of that organisation. And Kirkton Road Centre, so it's health promotion around alcohol and drugs. And then Surry Hills Neighbourhood Centre is involved, and other volunteers. And we go out on the street with a mobile clinic and we do naloxone training and hand out naloxone. And for those who don't know, naloxone is the antidote to opioid overdose. And we also take food out. So we cook. So we've got a fantastic kitchen here at Surry Hills Neighbourhood Centre, and I often use food as a tool for engagement with the community. It's a fantastic tool which I highly recommend. So we take out delicious food and some cool tunes, and we have music and food, and we also had an incentive. I think they got a $20 Coles voucher if they participated. And I think the last time we did it, I think we handed out 80 naloxone kits to the community, and trained I think 30 community members. I mean, that's definitely in the business of saving lives. And when you come away from an event, and also because there's music and food and people hung around and there's great conversations, there are other health outcomes that happened. I think people got tested for COVID last time because there was there was a clinic there. They had conversations about hepatitis treatment, and yeah. So other outcomes happen as a result of people hanging around and having conversations. But it always brings me goosebumps when you walk away from an event and you know you've saved lives. It sort of takes me back to the 90s when I was working around HIV and AIDS, and at the time when, you know, health promotion around HIV prevention was about saving lives back then too.
It sounds like the collaboration with those other organisations is a really important aspect.
Collaboration starts at our table. Yeah, it's a really cohesive table, and it's not just the organisations I've mentioned. There's probably a stronghold of between 15 and 20 organisations who keep coming back to the table and have done so for 4 years, and we're a great team now, yeah, who miss each other and want to see each other and come together and then work together really well. So the collaboration is already happening, and there's a fantastic enthusiasm at our table, which I am blessed to have, and I know that, yeah, I'm just lucky to have, sometimes things just fall that way.
Were there any particular obstacles you needed to overcome when you were planning the Overdose Awareness Day?
Absolutely. So you've got to secure funding. Yeah. Yep. There was funding coming from 3 different organisations to pull that together. Yeah. They weren't large amounts of funding, but 3 small amounts of funding coming together, and human resource is significant. I think one of the biggest things that we had to achieve to pull that off was the connections with peers, with people who use drugs in the community. And without newer, they were sending, people were running up and down social housing, you know, up and down the lifts and knocking on doors and saying, come down, there's some food and there's a 20, you know. And without that, it wouldn't have happened. We could have turned the music up 10 more decibels and it still wouldn't have happened. Yeah. And it cannot be underestimated, the value of peer participation.
Just in summary, what are the key takeaways from that exercise that you think are useful for other CDATs to know when they're planning their own activities?
Collaboration, peer involvement. I always have food as a tool for engagement. Create an atmosphere. You know, I know that we often started up with just putting a trestle table out and information, and then the music and the food were added, and just creating a reason for people to hang around and have conversations, you know, and some of those are meaningful conversations, some of those are just conversations, but they're really all meaningful because the next one might be that conversation that you're really there for. Yeah. Also, I haven't touched on stigma and discrimination, and I just think it's always something that should be in the forefront of our mind. I think, and that is about what language I'm using when I'm talking to people, or talking about people, not just drugs and alcohol, but people who use drugs and alcohol, and bringing non-judgment and compassion to the table. Once again, meeting people who use drugs, hearing people's real story.
That's fabulous. And I think it's really important to bear in mind always that there is a difference between the use of drugs and alcohol and the harms caused by drugs and alcohol, and understanding that not everybody who uses drugs and alcohol is necessarily going to be harmed by them. But
yeah, I think, and media hypes us so much about the harms and everything, and it's not that harms aren't there, but I think it's only 11% of people who use alcohol and drugs actually find themselves in trouble. Yeah. And that's the whole story, yeah. And a lot of people don't often. It's not. You don't have to have experienced trauma to take drugs. You usually are taking drugs because you want to have fun. It can lead to problems, but usually it's about fun. And occasionally we end up in trouble, and it's about how we support people who find themselves there, because it's just an unlucky roll of the dice. It could have been you, and you might not be the person who ended up in trouble, but it could have been, and it could be a loved one of yours tomorrow.
Sure. That's a really important thing to bear in mind, and I appreciate you bringing it up. And look, I think there's some valuable lessons to learn from your exercise and what you're doing here. So thanks again very much for your time. It's been really valuable.
Thanks, Dennis.